But there's a great awakening happening, folks. There really is. You know, everything they're doing, I mean, the stage 5 restrictions going on in Victoria. Dan Andrews, little Danny Hunchback, has said he's going to extend the lockdown for another 4 weeks because they need to, because it's a state of emergency. No, it's not. Danny, you're a little liar. I accuse you of fraud. I hereby formally accuse you of fraud. Daniel Andrews is carrying out a massive fraud against the people of Victoria, the same as Scott Morrison is carrying out a massive fraud against the people of Australia. Same as Anastasia Palaszczuk, she's carrying out a fraud against the people of Queensland. They're talking about closing the Queensland borders, shutting them down completely, because we don't want anyone spreading this virus here. The virus cannot be caught. Great article on why you cannot catch coronavirus, why coronavirus is not contagious. Because it isn't, folks, because viruses are not contagious. The government is lying to you, and so is the media. But they're very good at that, aren't they? It's about all they do, folks, is lie to us. That's all they ever do. But there's a great awakening happening, folks. There's a great awakening happening. And I think we're heading for a really good place, to be honest. I really do. I think the wheels are going to fall off this whole thing. We had a great meeting in Cascade Gardens on Saturday there was a meeting, about 150 people there. It was good. I got up and had a bit of a chat. Dave Onigs was there, the guy I had on the end of one of my videos who was ranting about what's going on in Victoria. Very powerful video that he put out. He was there, he organised it. We're going to have another one, I think, on the 11th. The 11th of, I'm not sure. The 11th of the 11th. I don't think so. I think it's going to be sooner than that, but we're going to have another one. We're going to have another gathering there soon, folks. I may even do a proper presentation there. So that will be an event on the Gold Coast. It'll be an outdoor event. I'll keep you posted on when that happens. It'll be probably in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be a free event, no charge. I'll be speaking. There'll be maybe 1 or 2 other speakers. And we'll see if we can get this word out to a few more people. Time to push back. Time to call the governments out for the fraud that they're committing. You know, they're charging people fines and fining people for breaking social distancing rules and all this sort of stuff, but it's all based on a massive fraud. And no one's calling it out for that. No one's saying, hey, listen, what's all this about? You know, fines are all very well if you're going to fine me for doing something, but when what the government is doing is asking me to perform an act of self-harm, and I'm being fined for not performing an act of self-harm, well, this is an abuse of office based on a massive fraud, and I'd like the government to explain themselves. And not only that, if you're going to charge me with breaking social distancing laws, fine. I'm going to put a counterclaim. I want to put a countercharge against the Premier, and I want to charge him with fraud. I want to charge him with abuse of office. I want to charge him with reckless endangerment of the public health. I want him to explain why he is doing what he's doing. I want him to explain why they are testing for a virus that they've never isolated, and how they are testing for a virus they've never isolated, and how they are doing anything with PCR tests which are not designed to look for infection. I want all this explained. So that's going to be my counterclaim against your fine for me breaking social distancing guidelines and daring to go outside and socialise with my friends. I mean, who the fuck are you people? That's basically what you need to say to them. Who the fuck are you people that you think you can have this type of control over others over a fraud? Because that's what it is, folks. It's a massive fraud. But like I said, I think there's an awakening. I think there's awakening. I think so many people are getting it now. So many people know that this is completely bogus. You know, if they lock down Queensland the way they've done Victoria, if they try to lock down the Gold Coast here, I personally think there's going to be a massive pushback. I mean, I'll certainly be pushing back. I'm not going to abide by any lockdown rules, that's for sure. Especially when they're based on fraud, like I said. They're all based on fraud. Where are we going here? So yeah, what can I say, folks? What can I say? The extent that the media is going to try to continue pushing this lie, and the extent the government is going to impose these restrictions on people as quickly as they can before they get a wind of what's happening. The amount of people that are speaking out against Bill Gates and the vaccine. And think about it, folks, the vaccine, what's the vaccine for? Why are they so worried about getting a vaccine? There's obviously no people dying. And you know what they're saying? They're saying, oh, good old Australians, the coronavirus restrictions, we've done well, we've almost limited, we've almost like completely ended the flu in this country this year because of the coronavirus restrictions have caused the flu rate to drop down so much. No, it hasn't, folks. The same people are dying from the same flus they always died from. They're just labelling them as COVID deaths because they're labelling everything as COVID deaths. And the hospitals are empty. All the people who are dying from not being able to have surgery they should have, they're labelling all these as COVID deaths as well. You know, it's a scam, folks. As I've said before, all the people who were taken out of hospitals because they needed to be there and were put into nursing homes and died in nursing homes were all murdered by proxy by government. They should have been in hospital, and all the hospitals are empty. You know, so... And now they're locking down Victoria for another 4 weeks, probably so they can finish rolling out all this 5G surveillance, social crediting infrastructure that they're rolling out. And folks, if you see that anywhere, if you go out and they've got QR codes on shops, you've got to scan the QR code to get in, I reckon you should just take a little can of spray paint with you and just spray over that so you can't scan the QR code. You know, we don't want your QR codes. We don't want your surveillance system. We don't want your social crediting system. We don't want your COVID tracing app and all the stuff that you're doing, which is all based on a massive fraud and based on the fact that this government is an illegitimate corporate entity anyway. So why don't you guys just fuck off? We're over it. And we're not going to do what you want us to do. And all this stuff you're going to roll out, we're just going to push back. We're not going to accept it. We're not going to use it. We're not going to do it. You know, that's what needs to happen, folks. Throw away all the smart tech. Throw away your smart tech. Don't scan QR codes to go into shops. Tell them if they're going to put a QR code at the front of the shop, you're not going to use that shop. You're going to go to other shops. You know, if it becomes to the point that it's everywhere, then we just go and social distance ourselves from the government, put ourselves into lockdown away from them, but keep associating with ourselves. Just step away from the whole thing. That's what we need to do, folks. The whole thing only functions due to our compliance with it. And we've got to stop complying with it. And I think a lot of people are getting it. Like I said, I think a lot of people are getting it. And there's going to be a huge pushback. I think we're going to see, virtually a worldwide revolution. But again, we've got to be careful of how we even do that, because what we're facing here is AI. As I've said before, it's AI that's running this whole thing. Even when you look at this Shadowgate documentary that Millie put out, showing how it's AI that selects the people in the jury duty, and it's AI is socially profiling everybody. AI is programming this whole thing. And that's the problem, Even if we pull down the government, arrest all these criminals. And something else about Millie's documentary, I mean, she's right on the Trump train. She really does think Trump's the saviour, and I don't. I don't think any politician is a saviour. I don't think there's any political remedy to this at all, because it's all being run by AI. And like I said, even if we pull down the governments, charge all these people for the crimes they've committed and try to restructure things into something better, the problem is the AI. And the AI is continuing. It's continuing to roll itself out. And things are just continuing to go where they're going to go. And that's what's happening in the background. Even if we remove the governments, the AI is still there. All this control grid's still there. All the smart system is still there. All the tech companies are still rolling it out because we're still using the products. And the AI that's coming is like, it's an unstoppable force. We reached the point in 2012 where it almost, and this may sound really esoteric, it almost feels like the timelines began to converge in 2012. And we crossed that Rubicon whereby whatever reality we are in, it's going to come to its inevitable conclusion, and they're all going to come to the same point. In 2015, we crossed the Rubicon as far as AI goes, our dependence upon AI. In 2015, we got to a point where we are now so dependent upon the internet, so dependent upon artificial intelligence, and so dependent upon all this smart tech to run our lives, that again, that has to come to its inevitable conclusion. And it's continuing, it's not stopping. And that is the unstoppable force. But what is the, I don't know, so-called truth movement? What is the independent media? What is those people who are awake, who simply won't back down to this? Well, that's where you find your immovable object. And we've got to the point where, yeah, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but unfortunately it's the oncoming train of AI, which is an unstoppable force. So we're getting to the point where the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. And what happens then? That's the question. What happens then? What happens then is a new reality. What that reality will be determined by the strength, the moral strength, the spiritual strength, the psychological strength of the immovable object. You know, the unstoppable force can come and it can wash over us and it can dissipate. But we have to be prepared to stand in our spiritual moral ground through this whole thing. You can't back down through any of this, folks. Now, people back down because they're in fear of death, in fear of what might happen to them. Death is the one part of life that is inevitable. There's no good going through your life in fear of death. You can't allow yourself to be turned into a slave and live your life in this little coward, horrible, little controlled state and have no life because you're in fear of death. I mean, all the life in the lockdown, all this stuff, you can't get this time back. This is your life that's been taken from you all the time that you're spending curfew, all the time that you're told you're not allowed to go outside, you can't get that back. If the virus goes away, and there is no virus, but if the whole pandemic goes away and they do let you out, you can't get any of that time back. This is your life that they're taking from you. And not only are they taking your life, they're taking your soul from you. They're taking what it means to be human from you, making you wear a mask, making you view other people as these infectious barrels of germs walking around that you've got to distance yourself from. It's a complete load of rubbish, folks. And it's getting to the point where people are seeing it. Many people are seeing it. And so you can't allow yourself to be pushed into that. You know, you can't allow yourself to be led into a reality where that becomes your reality, because it's not reality. So we're getting to this point, folks, where pretty soon all realities are going to collide. The question is, where will you be at that time? Are you prepared to walk the path of the warrior? Are you prepared to face infinity without flinching? And we're at the time now, folks, of the last battle. You've got to stand up and make noise about this. If you want to support that unstoppable force and you want to move us into a golden age, which we have every potential of creating here, you've got to be prepared to simply speak up and speak your truth and ask the right questions. How are you basing all of this on these claims that you're making? How are you locking us down? It's all a fraud. But don't even, suggest it. Tell them it's a fraud. It's a fraud. What you're doing is fraud. Show me how you can prove any of your claims. Because they can't. Problem is no one's asking this question. And of course, YouTube and Facebook are deleting the truth and deleting any type of rational discourse or any type of rational debate because it's problematic. And so a lot of people aren't getting the information. So that's where, we've got to do it. We've got to do it in our everyday lives and everything we do, folks. Share information to people. That makes a difference. Share information to people and lead by example in all that you do. Be a joy to be around.